This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Helena Clayton, and in this 6-part series, we're exploring love in coaching. With 25 years of working in leadership and organisational development, for the last 8 years, I've been researching, writing about and running leadership programmes and workshops exploring the role of love in leadership, in work and beyond. And for this series, I brought together 6 amazing coaches as my guests, all of whom are strong advocates and pioneers in what they do and how they think about and integrate love into their coaching. 3 of them are writing books about love. 1 has just submitted their master's thesis about love, and another talks so boldly about love to their international and very senior leadership audiences that it takes my breath away. So thank you for being here and for bringing your curiosity to this thought-provoking series at a time when the world needs love more than ever. Hello, so welcome to the 7th episode in the Love in Coaching series. Just me this time, thinking out loud on some of the themes that came from those 6 conversations. Also thinking about what I didn't get to ask and where I might have gone. And I'll share some additional resources along the way. There are about 5 themes that I pulled out from across the conversations, something of a red thread that came through. You may well have picked up different themes though, and I'll ask you about those at the end. So the first thing I want to pick up on, and this is a question that I asked everybody at the start of each conversation in one way, shape or form, and that was how coaching is changing. And about how the issues that they're seeing that their clients are bringing to coaching, how they are changing. So it came out really clearly that there was a sense that coaching is becoming much less about the performative aspects of a job, getting better at something that's role-related, and more maybe about holding space, creating time to think, creating space to think, about things like, who am I? What matters to me? What have I lost touch with in the busyness of life? What's my identity? What do I want? Who am I becoming? So much more perhaps about being rather than doing. And some of these, of course, are questions that align with some of the later action logics for those of us with an adult development interest. And in the conversations with Marie and Amy, there was something too about how we might need to draw less on tools and frameworks and work more on cultivating a greater attunement to our clients. Thomas Hubel and Nicholas Janney are 2 great people working in that field at the moment. So there was something about people wanting to go deeper in coaching. And while nobody was suggesting that coaching became therapy per se, there was something about it maybe being a little more therapeutic. And certainly lots of people these days are talking about whether the traditional lines between therapy and coaching are maybe starting to blur. I think we see it in leadership development more widely too, and certainly the sort of leadership development that I get to do. We hear more about container leadership and how leaders need to be equipped to hold the space for anxieties, fears, disappointments. And it's as much maybe about helping people hold steady and finding ways to be with what's changing rather than making things change. Making things bearable, being present and accepting with what is, as opposed to what ought to be or what people thought would be there. Then you may hear the language in what I've just said from Deborah Rowland, whose latest book, From Ought to Is a great read. So there's something about, whether all of those changes mean that the love work or the love adjacent work, compassion, empathy, nurture, creating deeper connections with us, maybe the ground is getting ready now for those qualities to come more to the fore in our work. And the second theme was that of how we coach out of our autobiography, or we lead out of who we are, or as David Rico says, the past is always present. So however you come at this, the starting place for us coaches is to get to know how our own stuff shows up in our coaching work. And have we done business with that, each of us? But also, if we're talking about love in our coaching work, then we also need to work out what our own relationship is with love, what we understand by it, what it means for us, who or what taught us about love, either directly or through observation, maybe what we have grown up understanding love to be in practice, or knowing the parts of us that are loving and the parts of us that are less so, etc. And I know that my work in this area began, well over a decade ago with something called the Hoffman process, which was really powerful for me, and continued even deeper with a wonderful organisation called Celebration of Being, and in various ways has continued ever since. You'll have your own ways, I'm sure. So it does require that we do our own deep work as coaches if we are moving more into holding the whole person, which might include creating space for conversations about trauma, for example, or working with the unconscious. Then yes, we need to do that deep dive personal growth work ourselves as coaches. Maybe we need to not only be in supervision, but also to be in therapy or be receiving some sort of therapeutic support. Abudi, in the conversation I had with him, talked about the work is to soften our hearts. And that may take a little more depth work than just deciding to do it. And thirdly, no conversation about coaching, no matter what the context, would be complete without a question of what this means for contracting. In this case, for contracting for working with love explicitly. You'd have heard that in the conversations with Marie and Claire. How we might need to contract when we are working in a way that is sort of more porous as a coach and working with more of an I-thou relationship for those of you who know Martin Buber's work. This came up in my conversation with Ian. And for meeting as two human beings as opposed to a coach and a client. And how do we contract for going deeper or to unexpected places? So what working with love means in coaching in regard to contracting is a really important question, which leads me on in a way to the fourth theme. And that's the choices we might make as coaches around whether we are explicit about love in coaching. Do we come out, as it were, and tell our clients that love is at the heart of our work? Or that we might explore love somewhere along the path we walk together? Is it on our website, for example? Or do we say nothing? We don't use the word love at all, but instead cultivate and hold a loving mindset. Some of you might know the Martha Postlethwaite poem called Clearing. She says, how do we create a clearing in the dense forest of our lives? So how might we just create an internal loving clearing into which a client can enter? Again, Marie, Claire, we talked about this. Because love is tricky, it's problematic. We can't just say, well, let's all be more loving. It's not so straightforward. It's problematic in many ways, not least its associations with religion, sex, intimacy, as well as the way trauma can block our capacity to love. And of course, the way that many of our organisations are set up to serve money, performance, growth, more than they are people and deep humanity. And one of my favourite quotes comes from the British actor, long gone, Kenneth Williams. He said, "Love is the most awful invasion of privacy." And it also came up in the conversation with Claire, right, about ethics in coaching when it comes to love. And it's worth me pointing you to two other people who are very explicit in their use of the word love. And I have podcasts with each of these people you'll find on my website. But Christopher Miller, who works in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and also Joshua Abramson in the States. Have a rummage around and find them. We'll put links in the show notes because both of them use the word love boldly and really explicitly in a kind of breathtaking way in their organisational work, which definitely leads me on to the next theme. I think we're up to 5. through several of the conversations, and most definitely in the one with Amy, a theme of how we might need to get bolder or braver, find more courage, to pioneer the edge-walking work in bringing healing and love into organisations. So for sure, we don't have to be the icebreaker or the trailblazer, but we can be the next wave, the ones following and creating a movement behind the people who are really leading boldly. George Monbiot, I don't think he talks about love. He's a political, environmental journalist, among other things. He was talking about things that really matter to the world and to us. And of those things and our choice to talk about them, he says this. He says, we need to get embarrassing about it and overcome our own reticence and risk upsetting people. We have a duty to break the awkward silence and talk about the subject other people want to avoid. Now, he wasn't talking about love, but I often use that quote when I talk about love. And I'm also thinking of the work you may already know on Tempered Radicals from Deborah Meyerson. It's a book on change. It's an approach to change. And she says, look, we have to bring difference to the system that we're working with, otherwise we can't create change. But we can't afford to look too weird or strange, so that the system kicks us out and rejects us. This is a bit like the perceived weirdness index in Gestalt. So how willing are you to risk using the word love in your practice? And for some reason, and I rarely quote this, I was drawn to this quote, which is from the rabbinic Jewish tradition, from the Ethics of the Fathers. And the quote is, "You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it." I have a sense that might be true of bringing love into work and in our coaching. So the next theme is about gender, love and gender. And I only explored this explicitly with Craig in my conversation with him. There's something way more than this. In the workshops that I run, I run a monthly free Acts of Love for Tough Times workshop, and I run an annual face-to-face, in-person, full-day workshop called the Love Lab. And in these workshops that I run, and it's been this way for years, the people who sign up and turn up are 90 to 95% women. And I used to get a bit bothered by that. I wanted the spaces to be for all, and I really missed the voice and the contributions of men. So I spoke to men that I knew, men who were running men's circles, men who I thought would have something to say that would be helpful to me in this. And here's what they said. They said, first off, men are highly unlikely to come to something with love in the title. So with men, they said, you can't really come at love head on directly, like you perhaps can with women. You have to come at it at a tangent, obliquely, as the poets would say, slantwise. And there is really good reason for that, deeply understandable reasons. And that's a whole other podcast series, I suspect. But men do have a very different relationship with love and the word love. And they also said, the men I spoke to, that men almost certainly won't come to a workshop with love in the title that is fronted by a woman. Men probably need to do their love work with other men. So I have let go of the need to try harder to bring men into my workshops. But I do want to tell you about what AI has to say on it. So before I sort of relaxed a little about this, I took the text of my Love Lab workshop and I put it into Claude AI and said, Claude, please rewrite this to appeal to more men. Claude came back to me with two things, one of which I actioned, the other I did not. So the first thing Claude said was, rewrite your text so that it has more headings, i.e. more structure, and more bullets. That I thought was sage advice, definitely. I could see the wisdom of that. I did it. That would be good for anybody. And then the second set of advice it gave me, which I have not put into practice, it also said, please write more about the return on investment for love. Please include more case studies and statistics, and you should make stronger links to how working with love will help with performance and career progression. So according to Claude AI, that is what men want. I don't believe that, and I've not amended my text. So I do recognise very much that work, love and men, good work is done elsewhere, and not much of it with me, and that's fine, and in different ways. So I do want to just give a shout out to a couple of good places. You have Craig, of course, as a great resource. But also check out the work of Will Johnson. You'll find him on LinkedIn in the UK. He does some great work with men and men's circles. And then 2 organisations, one in the UK and Europe called Celebration of Being. And they have a men's workshop called Noble Man, which is extraordinary. And then, of course, the global organisation, the Mankind Project, which has a very strong presence in the UK. Please check those out as well. So I think those are the main themes that I pulled out. You will have pulled out different things. But there were a couple more things I wanted to say. 2 things that I'm wondering about. The first is that I'm wondering about, as we coach, what we do with, how we bring in, how we integrate the wider context. What is happening in the world? What is the biggest picture that we are coaching within? And I'm thinking here of climate collapse, war, conflict, the rise of authoritarianism, plus the things that are much more problematic and closer to home about our education system, violence, the health service in the UK. And how that connects with or informs the relevance of love in coaching. Because is it our job as coaches to work only with what's in front of us? And or what's our role in initiating, bringing in the wider context? Now, this is a separate theme from love in coaching, but there is a link. I'll come to it in a tick. I once heard Miles Downey say on a Coaches Rising podcast that it was a big no-no for a coach to do that, to bring in stuff that was on their mind. And obviously we know that. Sorry, Miles, I didn't mean to be disrespectful there. I'm with you in so many ways. But if you're a fan of the 7-eyed model of supervision, you'll know that the wider context, which is eye 8, lens 8, is always at play. So if the past is always present, then so is the bigger picture and the wider context. So yes, of course, don't hijack and of course contract for it and feel into it with each coaching session or client. But here's the relevance. Here's why I'm mentioning it today. I'm increasingly wondering how it lacks love in some way to not also bring in the wider picture. And at least twice, I think, across the episodes, you will have heard me say that love is a wide-angled lens. And that quote comes from Bert Hellinger from Systemic Constellations and that work. And Deborah Rowland, who I've just mentioned, she has a sentence. She says, all action makes perfect sense when you can see the system in which it's situated. So I can't help but wonder if putting something in the bigger and then the bigger and then the even bigger context allows us to bring in more understanding. From understanding, we can move to compassion, and from compassion, we can bridge to love. So that's one thing. The other thing I'm pondering is if it's true that people are turning more towards questions of meaning and purpose, assuming, of course, that we have the privilege of enough bandwidth to do that. We don't all. I'm wondering about spirituality and what role that plays in coaching. I'm wondering about the relationship between spirituality and love. Is it the same? Is it different? I've been doing a diploma in supervision as spiritual practice with Robin Showett and Joan Wilmot over the last year or so. And that's been super interesting, hence my own interest, although it's been an interest for a long time. And Abudi, Ian and Amy for sure touched into that with me. We kind of got close to conversations about spirituality. And I think there is a growing interest. If you go over to LinkedIn, you'll see a new network has been recently set up called the Psycho-Spiritual Network. set up by Lee Chalmers, and that has had hundreds of people sign up in the last couple of months. I've just recorded a podcast conversation with Lee. That'll be on my website soon. So maybe there's also a series exploring spirituality in coaching that I'm pretty sure Abudi and Lee would very much lead. And then finally, I have been wondering through this reflection on the 6 conversations, whether I did enough for those of you listening, whether I covered enough about what love in coaching looks like in practice, like the nuts and bolts of it. What does coaching that is loving actually look like, sound like, smell like? Pierre Reverdy said, "There is no love, only proofs of love." So how would I know if my coaching was loving, and how would my coach know that there was love in the coaching? So I am wondering about the kind of how-to of coaching with love. And having said that, I am definitely not about to develop a set of competencies, for sure. As soon as we define something for me and really start to pin it down, I think we reduce our capacity to think expansively, to think actually, and it definitely becomes a little reductive. We shear off any nuance. And I also think that we have an instinctive sense of when something is loving and when something is not loving. That said, some guide rails can be helpful. And when I did my original research that sparked the work I do now with love in 2018 and then updated that research for 2023, there were 5 buckets, if you like, or 5 headings that were the themes when I asked my respondents of the research survey, what does love look like in practice in organisations? And the first heading would be, no surprise, it would be called care, under which would be empathy, connection, nurture, and the like. No surprise there. The others were a little more surprising, though. Second was listening. People said that when they were given undivided attention, when somebody was fully present with them, that felt like love. The third thing was around holding high standards. And in that bucket were things like saying no, being straight talking and honest, giving difficult feedback. Next was being generous, sort of putting people first, or putting other people first. And then finally, there was something about acceptance, maybe radical acceptance, accepting all of who we are, all of who the person is in front of us, warts and all, the damaged parts of us. So I think there are ways that we can get a little more practical about what it looks like, what it sounds like. And I will still keep working on that. But I did wonder, actually, if I missed a trick in not getting down and a bit more granular for you in those conversations. Nevertheless, we are where we are. Okay, so I am coming to the end of what I want to say in this episode. I want to leave you with some book recommendations. I'm often asked, what might I read? What's good on this subject? And there are 4 books. There are loads, right? But there are 4 that I've picked up for today. The first is a classic. It's Bell Hooks, All About Love. Gorgeous, fabulous book. Another one would be Love 2.0 by Barbara Fredrickson, definitely based in biology and chemistry. And that has strongly informed the one-day workshop I do called the Love Lab. A third book is, again, they're all fabulous, otherwise I wouldn't be recommending them, by Valerie Kaur, called See No Stranger. And that for sure invites us to think a lot about how we might cultivate love for people we don't know and for people who have hurt us or we strongly disagree with, much needed in these times. And finally, something from Erich Fromm, who's an Austrian psychiatrist, called The Art of Loving. Excellent on how love is a choice. But those are 4 fantastic reads. I hope you enjoy those. So I think that's me for now. What I will say is that I would love to hear your comments, your responses. If you picked out very different themes across the conversations, drop me a line, let me know. They will be things I've missed maybe. I'd love to hear what landed, what resonated, and I would particularly love to hear if there was anything you would like more of. Is there another episode that we could record at some point in the future on a particular aspect of what this series has covered? Is there a webinar that we could run? What would you like more of? Drop me a line at helena@helenaclayton.co.uk with all comments, feedback. It's all very, very welcome. So other than that, it's for me to say thank you so much for listening and for being here for this series. I've really enjoyed hosting it, and working with the Association for Coaching has been a joy. Thank you too for your interest in love, because it's really needed in these times that we're in. I have a feeling that conversations about love are the most important ones to be having right now. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, to advance the coaching profession, and to make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. There you can explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools and models, and the latest industry trends to help you develop your coaching expertise.